Oh, I have no idea what's happening. That's on. That's not muted. Cool. We did it. We're here. We're live. My roommate just startled the heck out of me. So I had my headphones on because I wanted to listen to 2113 with you guys. And then she probably knocked, but I had my headphones on, so I did not hear it. And I turned on and was like, My name is Bizarre Brynna. Welcome to my stream. If you have been here before, awesome. That's very cool of you to come back and watch more. And if you're new here, then thanks for showing up. I don't know how you found me, and I'm okay with that. This is this cat, everybody. Her name is this. And she's amazing. And she's a little tuxedo. Look at this. True story. So, I've had this cat since the day she was born. And when I got her, I didn't think that I was adult enough to have a cat. But I got her, and that's a different story. And then proceeded to put her in a backpack and walk her on a leash. And we toured across the country with a clown in my car. And then she lived in California with me for a while. And then she drove back across the country with me. So me and this cat have been through everything. And we've seen all of the stuff. And she's the best cat in the world. And I love her. She's perfect and amazing. So the chat is very quiet. Gives me feelings. To be fair, I did switch up the time. I did say 8:30 p.m. to most people last week, and then switched it to 8:13, but only because I've been listening to and keeping Secrets of Silent Earth a whole bunch since last week. So we're going to move the stream to 8:13 p.m. and all of the material on YouTube and everywhere else is wrong except for my Instagram story. So that's just goes to show you, if you want to stay up to date on when the stream is actually happening and what's going on, you should check out the Instagram, because it has most of the updates and tells you what's going on in most of the places. Most of the time. It's not focused at all. If you're looking for an Instagram that has like a purpose and is all influencery and stuff, that's not it. And sometimes I post about my contortion. I always post about my shows if they're public shows and I can. And sometimes I post about conditioning, and sometimes I post about Groundhog Day, and I post a lot about my cats. So if you're interested in that, follow me. Oh, if you want to see me in the near future, I will be performing in Raleigh, North Carolina this weekend on Saturday, May 11th. I think that's the date. I'll be performing in Raleigh, North Carolina at the World Oddities Expo. I'll be on their main stage. Then come to that. And it's a weird time. It's a weird time, but it's a fun time, and we really enjoy it. If you're curious, my Instagram is the same as my Twitch. It's at bizarre_Brynna. And maybe I'll throw that on the page or something. My door is open. This cat doesn't have thumbs. Don't look at my shorts. I do know what to say, but I don't know who's here, and this is news. I got so excited last week. So, since we're on this Instagram topic now, is that Claudio Sanchez shared my Instagram story. Like, the lead singer of Coheed and Cambria / the author of this awesome book shared my Instagram story about my YouTube VODs reading Year of the Black Rainbow, and I geeked out. I was very excited. So if you somehow found my stream through Claudio's share, that's really cool. Anyway, I thought it was really cool because I've been nervous about copyright issues and having content that I didn't, and reading out loud. Like, I'm making the content, but I didn't write the book. And so when he shared it and liked it, I felt a little bit better. I mean, I don't know what his lawyers think. Maybe he thinks it's horrible. Or maybe I don't know. Either way, I thought it was really cool, and I was really excited, and I'm trying not to negative self-talk about it. For 2 whole seconds, Claudio Sanchez kind of knew who I was. And that's pretty spiffy. That's a nifty thing. I mean, I know he's just a dude who's just living his life, trying to keep his life together on tour, and I don't know that much about him personally because I do my damnedest not to totally stalk famous people because they're dealing with their own stuff. And yeah, so like I'm sure he's just a dude living his life, but I keep tagging him in my posts because he did write the book. And the fact that he shared it just is, it's very cool. It's very cool because he's a big deal. He's super talented and a smart person and wrote a whole book, and all I'm doing is reading it on the internet, and he noticed and he shared it. But I'm also a very like blip on the radar of epicness and talent and celebrity for that matter, like just plain pure fact celebrity, in the scale of like me to Claudio Sanchez. So the fact that he noticed it at all, I just think it's very cool, and I'm very thankful. So anyway, I freaked out isn't the right word. I had a little moment in my brain, was like, and then I told Austin, and then Austin's like, just say thank you. I was like, okay. So I did, and then I thought about resharing it and tagging him in the share of my share, which seems like a thing that influencers do, but it also seems like a bananas wormhole of I shared your share of my share that we're sharing together. And I don't have enough influencer skill points to know if that's actually what you're supposed to do or if that's just some bullshit wormhole that I don't understand. Yeah. Let's get down to business. Now that I've officially chased away anybody who showed up on time, because most people exist on real times and not crazy Twitch nonsense time. I got my distraction, phloem. What else am I going to do? I guess begin at the beginning. So we're reading the book Year of the Black Rainbow, which is the prequel to all of the Coheed and Cambria comics. And you might say to me, Coheed and Cambria comics? ? And that's because if you didn't know, and I'm sure some of you do, because I'm sure if some of you are here, it's because you're music nerds and you're about this life. So there's this band that you may or may not have heard of called Coheed and Cambria. They're fantastic. I don't have any other words. They have probably 16 hours worth of music released alone. I don't know how many studio albums. I don't have their Wikipedia. A bunch. They're very good. They're very prolific. Extremely talented musicians, and their lead singer is an amazing vocalist, and the lyrics are awesome. And it's this I guess you'd call Coheed and Cambria progressive rock, prog rock. But you can hear throughout their albums how they grow from basically this like little pop punk ish band to this totally epic, beyond belief pseudo. I guess they've got a metal vibe to it, but even in their newest album, you can hear a lot of R&B influences and pop influences and stuff like that. And I love that. I love it when I don't know why I'm readjusting so much. I love it when you can hear a band grow and evolve, and Coheed and Cambria is definitely one of those bands that took something and they just keep growing with it. They just keep making more stuff and taking things from their lives and making it better and cooler and bringing in a bigger audience. So Coheed and Cambria, this epic, prolific, fantastic band, they also released comics. And they didn't base their albums off of the comics. The comics were released as companion pieces. So all of their albums, every single album, is a concept album based on the comics that went along with it. So they're friends. It's not one based one off of the other. The comics and the albums are units, whole heckin' units. And I remember looking at the comics a little bit when I was younger, and I never read them. I just looked through them, look at the art. They were good. I just didn't care. I played a lot of D&D, but comics weren't really my medium. And they were kind of hard to get a hold of. And I could only get a hold of them digitally, and I don't love reading digitally. I didn't really read the comics back then. But in 2010, they released an album called Year of the Black Rainbow, which coincided with a novel that Claudio Sanchez wrote himself with the help of Peter David. And this novel was the prequel to all of the comics. So if you wanted to know about the lore and how Coheed and Cambria came to be, also those are names of characters, then you could read the novel hypothetically and learn all of those things. I had never read the novel. I had listened to the album, Year of the Black Rainbow, and I think it's really funny because I remember listening to it, and did I love it at the time? No, but also I find that a lot of Coheed and Cambria music for me, sometimes I don't love it at first, but I love it like the third time when I found it in a different playlist and it like snuck up on me. And I'm like, oh shit, what's this? And then I listen to it and it's fantastic. But it's funny because on the internet, everybody seems to say to read the book before you listen to the album. I didn't do that. But if you've never listened to the album Year of the Black Rainbow, you should stay tuned to the Twitch so that we can read the book Year of the Black Rainbow together. So cool. That's basically the gist. I think we're ready for the recap. We're currently in chapter 8. We've covered a lot of ground so far. There's a universe. It's kind of like our universe, but it's a little bit different. It's called Heaven's Fence. There's a bunch of planets, like 67 planets. I will look that up because that will annoy me if I don't. 78. And the 78 planets are linked together by beams of blue light called the keywork. And the keywork acts as like travel portals in between these planets, and it also feeds the planet. So every single one of these planets has some form of life on them. And some of it's more traditional, like at least from what I can tell, like Apody Prime, which has cities and people and professors and doctors and researchers. And then there's also planets like the Howling Earth, which is filled with ghosts. So all of these 78 planets are connected by this thin beam of blue light, or big beam of blue light called the keywork, and the keywork connects everything together and it feeds the planets, and nobody's entirely sure what the keywork is, but they know that it's important. So like most people don't fuck with it. Also, there's a lot of debate in between theologians, like people who are really religious and philosophical and think that everything is God's plan, and scientists who believe that everything is based on science and how it's created is all scientific and stuff. Heaven's Gate is arranged in a triangle with some circles, and it's also the Coheed and Cambria band logo. So if you've seen the Coheed and Cambria band logo, then you've seen the keywork and you didn't know. You're welcome. Learning stuff every day. In the prologue, we learn that there's 3 types of beings. We have the mages, and the mages they're not quite gods. They can be killed and injured, but they live forever. They live a stupid long time, and they, as far as I can tell, are all men, and they're gray-skinned, and they used to be bald. They're not all bald now, and they've got horned shoulders and glowy eyes, and they're kind of like gods, and they all kind of have superpowers, and they're blessed in different ways, but they're also very regimented and kind of like monks. Also, there's 12 mages, and they're sent to guard over the people, and they're divided up into sectors, and so kind of like 12, I wouldn't say popes, because they don't really directly talk to God. They're just influenced by him, and then they have superpowers from him. Whoever God is from on high, and it's super important. And those are the mages. Then you have humans, and humans are just the worker bees of Heaven's Fence. They do the work, they build the things, they have science. There's some smart ones, there's some less smart ones, there's some normal ones. They're just people, and they're basically like you and me. They're just people. And then you have the prize, which I have been calling the priests, but through recent discovery realized that I'm pronouncing it wrong, and they are called the prize. And the prize are basically angels. They're really fair, blue-skinned maidens with blonde hair that are typically naked. They have wings, and we learned last time that they have a hive mind, kind of. Like, they're all individuals, but they all think together, and they speak as one voice. And their one voice is called the Guardian, and the Guardian wears a tiara. And you don't really hear much about them because, for the most part, they just sit in their star land and think about God's riddles. Those are the types of beings. That's the world. In chapter 1, we met Coheed and Cambria. We realized later that's somewhere in the middle. Like, we missed a lot of backstory. We just started in chapter 1 on the Howling Earth, and there was an epic fight scene, and it was a lot. And I'm really glad that it was written that way because it was exciting, but it definitely threw me for a loop. Watch the VOD for that. I'm not going to explain that chapter. Then in chapter 2, we found out that Covent-Marth talked to Wilhelm Ryan, and Covent-Marth was all like, oh my god, Wilhelm. Also, mages, some of them are born mages, others get nominated to become mages, and there's like 12. We don't really know how that timeline works, because I feel like that timeline is so long and epic that we don't get to know. Anyway, Covenant Martha's all like, Wilhelm Ryan, you're going to end everything and break all the stuff. And Wilhelm Ryan was like, nuh-uh. And then he did. Basically, Wilhelm Ryan came in and either assassinated all the other mages or kidnapped them and put them in incubators. This happened over an amount of time, and they were called the Mage Wars. And then at the end of the Mage Wars, it was decided that Wilhelm Ryan won. Woo! And then he sprayed drugs at everybody on Apathy Prime, and they had a giant party. And then Wilhelm Ryan was like, fight me, God. So that's where we left Wilhelm Ryan at. Covenant Marth, dead. He went poof. He poofed. And we liked him. So we're sad about that. Wilhelm Ryan also has a little commander buddy named Deftenwolf, Mayo Deftenwolf. And even after editing the VODs, I still have no idea what that man's voice is. And I hope that if he comes up again, I will find some sort of consistency. Mayo Deftenwolf is his commander and basically is just got a super hard on for Wilhelm Ryan, who also is usually just referred to as Ryan, which I think is lame because that's a lame name. So then, during the Mage Wars, there's a bunch of riots and stuff, and we meet this guy named Dr. Hohenberger, who's married to his wife named Pearl. Pearl is making a bug called a syringa, which she has learned to genetically alter in the chrysalis phase, and I feel like that's important information for our future, but we haven't really quite gotten there yet. And they have a son named Joseph, and Joseph goes to a rally and dies, trying to rebel against Wilhelm Ryan. It's very sad. Basically, Dr. Hohenberger and his wife Pearl are just fudged up. They're so upset. They're super distraught. She goes catatonic for a while. She's like, you need to avenge our son's death. He's like, how am I going to do that? I'm just a man. And she's like, I'm sad and I hate you for this, but also I love you and don't leave me. And he's like, I'm just like a smart scientist, dude, but I don't know, man. And also he's having this existential crisis where he's a scientist, but he also wants to believe that there's some sort of God master design thing. And so he's got a lot of issues with that, where he's just like, God has something to do with this. And his wife is like, you're a scientist, don't believe in God. I'm still mad at you. So they get in a big fight and this is probably some time after their son has been shot and killed in this rally. And then Wilhelm Ryan wins. Then Leonard goes into the woods and he's super sad after this fight with his wife. And as he's there, crying and talking to himself, a prize shows up. And it gives him this giant spark of inspiration by poking his forehead, and then he screams at her. Basically, a bunch of stuff in his brain is unlocked. Like, he knew all the things, but now he knows how to put them together, and he can use this information to create a ground team to help stop Wilhelm Ryan, because the fear is that even though the Mage Wars are done, what's going to happen next? Wilhelm Ryan is this crazy megalomaniac who's trying to take over everything, and what's he going to do next now that he's conquered all of the mages? Who's going to stop him? Who's going to fight him? And the answer is nobody knows. But according to the prize and Pearl, who is Leonard Hohenberger's wife, it's going to be Dr. Hohenberger with his ground team of a hypothetical 3 people. We don't know who those 3 people are at all. We do. It's the same 3 people from chapter 1. I have some questions about growing people because it sounds like they don't have enough time for a childhood, and yet somehow Coheed and Cambria are married. But like, were they just built to be married to each other, or did they make that decision? What's their childhood trauma like? Were they given memories? Is it like Blade Runner, where the memories were pumped into them so that they can believe that they're real people? Or do they know? Or do they not know? Does that affect them psychologically? I'm sure we're going to find out. We'll talk about the prize. The prize live on a star. They've got one speaker who speaks for them. Oh, I missed the most important part of this. After Wilhelm Ryan wins the Mage Wars and sprays drugs on a bunch of humans and is like, yeah, God, fight me, a black rainbow shows up, which it sounds daintier than it is. It's this giant celestial black cloud that all of the planets in Heaven's Fence can see. That shows up, everybody can see it, and everybody's, the humans are like, oh, some of the humans are like, oh, Wilhelm Ryan did this to like show his support for stuff. Wilhelm Ryan's like, I don't know where that came from. And the prize notice it on their star, and they haven't really talked to people in millennia, basically. And they notice it, and they're like,
oh shit, this is from God. Maybe we should have done something about Wilhelm Ryan earlier. But we didn't, because we were too busy. We were too busy sitting in our star, just kind of watching stuff and listening to God's riddles.
So they didn't do anything. And then Paranoia got the tiara, and the Black Rainbow showed up, and she's like, fudge, I've got to deal with this. That's when she poked Leonard Hohenberger on the face and told him that he's going to save humanity. And there we are. That's everything that's happened so far. Year of the Black Rainbow by Claudio Sanchez, Peter David. Chapter 8, A Wretched Design. I wonder where we're at. I don't know what's going to happen. While Hohenberger worked, the ebony stripe in the sky was changing heaven's fence. There were incessant disputes as to the significance of the Black Rainbow, what it meant for the present, and what it portended for the future. Entire cults arose centered on either worshipping or disparaging the Black Rainbow. The reactions were typically extreme, divided between those who saw it as a sign that supported the rule of Wilhelm Ryan and those who saw it as a condemnation of Wilhelm. Either way, how it related to Ryan was at the center of all such disagreements, and that suited Wilhelm Ryan just fine. The normally bright days that graced the fence were now dingy and gray. Reports of respiratory infections increased tenfold. Emergency clinics were filled with wheezing children and worried adults. Cases of depression became more widespread, bordering on the epidemic. Enthusiasts described the era as the year of the Black Rainbow, and social scientists came to the conclusion that all that death was actually misdirected anger. The real target was Ryan, but, at least at first, people felt that Ryan was untouchable, unassailable, too well protected, and too powerful. They channeled their rage and frustration at each other, or even themselves. By the same token, there were just as many who channeled their desperation into supporting the one being who they thought can make the Black Rainbow go away, namely Wilhelm Ryan. While Ryan's zealots and those who opposed his rule had conflicting agendas, they would prove to have a very dangerous something in common. A rapturous passion to fight for the cause, to the point of unspeakable crimes against one another. Conflicts arose that erupted into confrontations. When such confrontation threatened to bubble over into full-blown conflicts, sometimes Ryan men would intercede. But when rioting over the Black Rainbow showed no sign of an end, Ryan grew bored with wasting the Red Army's military resources on keeping the peace for a people he considered no more than insects. He appointed 12 overseers, designated them as Eurocons, and charged them with regulating the sectors and reporting to him. It was a means of cutting through the cumbersome array of governments and bureaucracies that had infested Heaven's Fence. If Deft and Wolf was at the hand of Ryan, Eurocrons were fingers, keeping their pulse on the people, acting on behalf of and with Ryan's authority. In short, the Eurocons were able to turn off kettles before the water within reached a full boil. After a time, Ryan no longer even bothered to glance at the skies. They keep saying it's the year of the Black Rainbow, but it's got to be longer than a year. This timeline is bananas if it's only a year. After a time, Ryan no longer even bothered to glance at the skies. Leonard Hohenberger, on the other hand, never lost sight of them, or what the object displayed above represented. He estimated initially that it would take him at least 6 months to create his first proto-human, or IRO bots, as he called it. He beat the schedule, though not by much. He looked upon the face of his creation, which was a mirror image of his own, and knowing that he would send his creation into the inferno of battle, he dubbed him Inferno. We need Inferno! Oh no! Leonard's voice and Inferno's voice are so different. I do remember Inferno's voice. And then he set about creating the remaining 2/3 of his trinity. The man he created from cell samples of the origins of which he knew. The woman he fashioned from cell samples, the origins of one of which he did not know, but oddly never wondered about. Had he been of a mind to question it, and had he received an answer to that question, he would have learned that it was cellular material that had come to him courtesy of the prize. But he did not ask, and therefore did not know, which is either good or bad depending on whether one believes that ignorance is bliss or folly. ... The asterisks mean scene change. Whoop. Coheed came online 18 weeks, 3 days, 18 hours, and 18 minutes after the moment that he was conceived. He knew absolutely nothing. His mind was blank, a tabula rasa. He did not know his name, nor would he have been able to speak if he had known. He did not know what he was, where he was. He was a creature of pure sensation. Slowly he became aware of his whereabouts, but he would not have been able to express any understanding of them or explain them to anyone. All he knew was that he was floating, except he didn't know any state other than floating in an 8-foot tall cylinder, except he didn't know shapes, someplace, except he didn't know places, and that he was hungry, except he didn't know how to eat, or what to eat, or even what eating was. Naked and drifting helplessly in the all-enveloping nutrient bath, Coheed slowly opened his eyes. Nothing made any sense to him, because he had no frame of reference. All he knew was that slowly that pang in his gut was beginning to subside. He had no way of knowing that it was because the gestational tube connected to his belly was pumping sustenance directly into him. As his body's needs were being attended to, Coheed twisted around in the tube and tried to see something of his whereabouts. What he managed to discern was a female, except he didn't know. Female, the opposite of male, the gender of humanity capable of producing ova, eggs, for fertilization and procreation. The knowledge came flooding into his head, as if someone else was pouring information into it. Coheed was startled, and his body went rigid momentarily. Her eyes were closed, her hair floating around her head like a black mass of seaweed. His eyes lingered over the curve of her hips, the upturn of her breasts. Oh, this is a new person! He's reacting to Cambria. The observation had been made by Dr. Raine. Prim and proper, she was one of the 2 lab assistants who Hohenberger had taken on to aid him in some of the detail work in the creation of the IRO robots. She and her partner, Dr. Stockmeyer, had been willing to come on board in total secrecy without asking any questions. Logical questions such as, what are you planning to use these things for? What do you mean he's reacting? Hohenberger crossed the lab and leaned over her, studying the readings. Before an aide could respond, Inferno did so with his customary calm, slightly superior tone of voice. Oh no, that's not how he sounds at all when I've done it so far. He's reacting, Doctor, to the fact that she's a woman. Hohenberger found Inferno's attitude to be rather annoying, and even more so when Pearl observed that he sounded remarkably like a young Leonard Hohenberger. I never thought I was that arrogant, Leonard said archly. And furthermore, I was never that young. Pearl laughed, comment, which was gratifying to Hohenberger. Her laughter, so easily expressed in the past, had been the first thing to vanish when the grief of her son's death had overwhelmed her. The fact that it had returned to her was an augur of good things as far as Hohenberger was concerned. It appeared that the creation of the IRO bots had been therapeutic for her. It gave her a sense that they were accomplishing something and served to extinguish, or at the very least dampen, the flames of rage burning within her. That's impossible, said Hohenberger to Inferno's assessment of Coheed's state of mind. He's designed to be emotionless, asexual, both of them. Makes them more effective fighting machines. Whatever the intent, Doctor, said an aide. Judging by the readings, the pulse, the hormone surge, he's reacting in a way that doesn't seem consistent with that design. You should not be assuming anything, Hohenberger said, checking the computer feed. The instrumentation was operating within normal parameters, indicating that bits of information were flowing into Coheed's cerebral cortex as planned. The data doesn't necessarily indicate any casual link between Coheed's perception of Cambria and the readings you're getting. It could well be a coincidence. It possibly is. An aide shrugged, but Hohenberger could see in her face that she remained unconvinced. Inferno stared thoughtfully at Hohenberger. Doctor, if I may ask. Of course, Inferno. You can ask anything you wish. That is the only way you will learn. That, and having data pumped directly into my head as you are in the process of doing with Coheed and will shortly be doing to Cambria. Yes, well, there is that. Anyway, you wanted to ask me something? You created me. You are in the process of creating 2 more beings such as myself. Why am I not producing an army of you? Yeah, several reasons. First and foremost, resources. The amount of cellular material that is required to produce one of you is sizable. Finances are a restriction in acquiring it? Finances are a factor, but not the only one. I'm endeavoring to make certain that Wilhelm Ryan does not learn of my activities. If I attempt to create the sizable army that the situation would seem to call for, I risk sabotaging my efforts before they reach fruition. The more IRO bots you produce, the more likely he is to notice. That is exactly. Slowly, Inferno nodded. That makes a great deal of sense. Thank you, Inferno. Inferno's gaze never left him. If anything, it seemed deeper and more penetrating than ever. Of course, it may also come down to trust issues. Trust issues? I'm not sure I'm following you, Inferno. It is rather simple, really. You cannot be certain of how your 2 other creations and I will function once we are put out into the world. will no longer have full control over us. We will be receiving new information, new cortical stimulation that you will have nothing to do with. There is always a concern that we might wind up allying ourselves with Ryan. If you produce only 3 of us and Ryan should turn us, that is hardly as problematic as producing 300 of us or 3,000 and unwittingly delivering a devastating army into Ryan's hands. Hohenberger held his gaze for a long moment and laughed. Inferno, he said. Believe me, when I have Coheed and Cambria fully functional, 3 of you will be more than a match for any army. 3 of you will be all that is required. I hope that you are correct, Doctor. I know I am. He patted Inferno on the back. Why don't you monitor the information flow? After all, you're far more attuned to machinery than I am. It should come more naturally to you. Yes, Doctor. Hohenberger watched him go, and kept the smile etched on his face for as long as he could. Eventually, though, it faded. It disturbed him how well Inferno was able to know Hohenberger's mind. He should not have been surprised. Of the 3 of them, Inferno was closest to Hohenberger, a 99% genetic match. He was starting to feel relieved that there would be other genetic components in the Coheed mix, and obviously even more in Cambria. There were only so many people he wanted to be of the exact same mind as he was. Doctor, it's finished! Dr. Stockmeyer entered with his typically gangly stride, his skinny limbs swinging like pendulums on a clock as he moved. He was carrying something that was several feet long beneath a cloth cover. That was typical for him. Stockmeyer always had something of a flair for the dramatic. He shoved away stub materials carelessly from a table and lay it down. Dr. Raine cocked her head and stared at it with dog curiosity. Hohenberger just grinned. Is the new toy ready? It is indeed. Care to demonstrate? Happily. He walked away, but quickly returned with an iron bar about 5 feet long. Then, pausing for effect, yanked the cloth clear. There was what appeared to be a long skeletal metal arm line. It gleamed in the morning light. At the moment, he said, as he carefully positioned the iron bar so that it was leaning against the skeleton, I've rigged it to be triggered by sound, in this case, the clapping of hands. You mean like this? Said Raine and brought her hands together. No, wait! Shouted Stockmeyer, and then, realizing that it was too late, he threw himself backwards. He was barely in time as machete-like blades snapped out of the metal arm. One of them sliced through the iron bar and it clattered to the floor, nearly bisected. The pieces fell next to Stockmeyer, who was also on the floor, gasping for breath. Raine had a hand to her mouth. Her eyes were wide in shock. I see they work, said Inferno mildly. Oh my God, said Raine, whose involvement had been purely in tracking the IRO bot's DNA and hadn't at all been involved with the development of weaponry. She went to Stockmeyer and put out a hand, helping him up. Stock, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what I was thinking. No harm done, Stockmeyer said, smoothing his lab coat and trying to recapture the air of professionalism. As I was saying, at the moment, sound responsive. Once the structure is implanted in Coheed, they will be cybernetically entwined. He merely has to think it, and the blades will be produced. And the cannon? Ah, even better. Be right back. This time, when he returned, it was with something else covered. This time on a rolling table. With that same overly dramatic flourish, he yanked off the to reveal a small but nonetheless formidable-looking cannon. A transforming arm cannon. The basic mechanisms were designed to create a digging machine. I customized it for our uses. It may look heavy, and he easily lifted it off the table, but it's incredibly lightweight. Coheed will have no trouble wielding it, and it will have minimal recoil. Why is he getting all the weaponry instead of Cambria? Said Raine. Cambria isn't going to have the bone structure or necessary body density, said Hohenberger. He pointed toward her, floating in the tank. But she'll have other advantages. Stockmeyer, who was cradling the weapon, turned toward Cambria. That's true. She will possess low-level psionic. At that moment, Cambria opened her eyes for the first time. Information was still pouring into her cerebral cortex. There was enough there to tell her that a gun was a weapon, and that a weapon being pointed at her was a threat to her well-being. Eyes widened, and the liquid in the tank bubbled ever so slightly, which was just enough warning for him, processing the information faster than any normal man possibly could have. Just as Inferno knocked Stockmeyer flat, the air above him seemed to come alive with the force of a seismic shock. It ripped over Inferno's head, kept going, and knocked over a cabinet that weighed just over 300 pounds. The cannon clattered to the ground. The moment it did, there was the sound of retracting squares of metal emerging from the base and all along the shaft of the cannon. Within moments, the entire device had transformed into what looked like a solid metal arm. The fingers twitched spasmodically. Perceived threat past, Cambria's eyes fluttered shut. What the hell was that? Dr. Anade shouted. I'm not sure, said Hohenberger. Dr. Anade turned to look at him, her face grave. I was right, wasn't I? You denied it, Doctor. Denied it to my face, but damn it, I was right. Those DNA matches. You said I was reading too much into it. Into what? Said Stockmar, as Inferno helped him to his feet. Cambria, she said, has DNA traces that have a .0001 matchup with those of a typical mage. That's impossible, says Stockmar. Mages don't procreate. They don't provide DNA samples. How would you even know? There are certain markers to look for. I thought I spotted them, and Dr. Hohenberger claimed that I was getting concerned over nothing. My God, Leonard! And she looked with worry toward Cambria. We've kept ourselves purely on a need-to-know basis, but the things you're mucking with, that you've pulled us into, the danger involved, they could wind up blowing this place off the face of the world before they're even fully activated. It will be fine, he said with conviction. I promise you. And if you're wrong, what are you going to do when this place is a crater and we are all incinerated? What are you going to say? Whoops, that won't happen. How can you be sure? Because I can be, he said firmly. And you can too. He was sure that would be enough. That's it. So that was the end of chapter 8. We finally have met Coheed and Cambria again. I remember after chapter 3, I think, I was like, where's Coheed and Cambria? We heard about them a lot, and now they're gone, and nobody knows what's going on. And so now they're back and they're in tubes. And Inferno's there, and I 100% gave Inferno the wrong voice. Because he is apparently just Dr. Hohenberger, but an IRO bot. I'm going to eat some chocolate animal crackers. We're going to think about our life and our choices. We're going to read the next chapter. If you want to check out Coheed and Cambria live, they are on tour this summer. They're hitting a lot of awesome places. Either way, they're going to be in Philly at the beginning of August, and I don't know if I'm going to make it to that show, but I am going to try to go to the DC show or the Richmond show, or maybe all of the shows, because live, this band is fantastic. The energy they bring to the stage, the way that the crowd really gets into it. There's one song in specific that I didn't love until I saw them perform it live. Like, I knew it and I liked it, but then feeling the energy of the crowd during the song changed everything for me, and it's fantastic. And now that I'm telling you about it, I don't know what that song is called because I didn't take notes. They're touring with Primus this summer. They're also touring with Puddle's Pity Party, actually. That's on that tour also. So if you're into sad clown music, check out Puddle's Pity Party. This tour is going to be bananas. It's going to be great. But Primus and Puddle's Pity Party aren't going to be at the Philly show. They're going to be at the Richmond show and the DC show. The Philly show is with Incubus, which is fine. That's also a good band. But like that's what it is. If you haven't subscribed to my Twitch, please subscribe to my Twitch because I did turn off ads during the stream so that during reading things aren't randomly interrupted with ads because I know that's annoying. Subscribe to my Twitch if you want to. If you subscribe and you slide into my DMs, I mail you a sticker. Good night, everybody. I love you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to this story.
Say, hey, we're gonna wrap up this chapter, so bye.